the so-called 27 Club. Eric Siegelstad and Josh Hunter wrote a book asking why they die so young.
The quote that Janis Joplin told her biographer back in 1970 or so was, "People, whether they know it or not, like their blues singers miserable. Maybe my audience can enjoy my music more if they think that I'm destroying myself." And I think that that's a quote that, Amy probably would agree with.
It's an unexplained statistic that's become both rock and roll myth and legend. And as we see crowds of fans come to pay tribute to Amy Winehouse's home here, many are asking if aspiring artists are in danger of glorifying the 27 Club. That's what critics are saying about rapper MIA's tribute to Amy Winehouse. Released to the public on her Twitter account with the message "R.I.P. Amy," a previously unreleased demo with haunting lyrics about a friend's suicide. It was recorded before Winehouse's death, but clearly references the 27 Club. Here's what Amy Winehouse told CNN in 2007.
No, I don't write songs because I want my voice to be heard, because I want to be famous or any of that stuff. I write songs about things that I have problems with, and I have to get past them, and I have to make something good out of something bad.
It's expected to take weeks to determine what killed Amy Winehouse, but with such songs as Back to Black and Rehab, she has joined the ranks of artists whose music and tragic early death have created a legend that lives on. Atika Schubert, CNN, London.
Anyone who thinks 13 is the unluckiest number should take a closer look at 27. Once you realize just how many celebrities have died at that age, it starts to get a little distressing, particularly if you happen to be 26. Though there are plenty more, here are 10 of the most famous of stars who died at age 27. Jonathan Brandis. Although already acting while he was still fairly young, it was as a teen heartthrob that Jonathan Brandis found the greatest success of his career. Brandis starred in the NBC series seaQuest DSV and films like The Neverending Story 2, Ladybugs, and Stephen King's It. When seaQuest ended in 1996, things began to slow down for Brandis. His role in the 2002 Bruce Willis film Heart's War was virtually trimmed out of existence in the film's final cut, and his 2003 pilot 111 Gramercy Park wasn't picked up. Brandis' life tragically came to an end after he hung himself on November 12, 2003. Amy Winehouse. She may have started out jazzy with her 2003 debut album Frank, but once she shifted into more soulful territory on 2006's Back to Black, Amy Winehouse became an international sensation. Winehouse's voice was a marvel, and both her look and attitude regularly led to press coverage. But she also made more than a few headlines with her intense personal relationships and her tendencies towards excess. When she died on July 23, 2011, the coroner's inquest revealed that her blood alcohol level was more than 5 times the legal limit for driving in the UK. Kurt Cobain. It would be a disservice to dismiss Kurt Cobain as just another rock star with a death wish. Cobain's contributions to music remain significant even decades after his death. Unfortunately, Cobain had demons to spare.
But I was in pain. I was in pain for so long that I didn't care if I was in a band. I didn't care if I was alive,
Although he found solace in music, it wasn't enough to keep those demons at bay. After skipping out of a Los Angeles rehab facility where he was attempting to kick his heroin habit, Cobain flew home to Seattle and turned a shotgun on himself, though conspiracy theorists still believe his death wasn't a simple suicide. He died on April 5, 1994, leaving his young family behind. And it wouldn't be the only death that his wife Courtney Love would have to face that year. Kristen Pfaff. It took a while for Courtney Love to convince Kristen Pfaff to become the bassist for her band Hole, but she eventually came around. Unfortunately, while in Seattle to record Hole's second studio album, Live Through This, Pfaff developed a drug habit. She entered a detox center in February of 1994, but in the wake of Kurt Cobain's death, she left both Hole and Seattle behind for good. On June 16, 1994, the day before her planned departure for Minneapolis, Pfaff was found dead in her apartment after overdosing on heroin. Jimi Hendrix. Unless you want to accuse the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame of hyperbole, Jimi Hendrix is arguably the greatest instrumentalist in the history of rock music. Frustrated by the music industry, Hendrix wasn't in the best state during the final days of his life. He was battling a recording contract dispute, contemplating leaving his manager, and dealing with the departure of bassist Billy Cox from his band. He'd also been hit with a paternity suit, was having trouble sleeping, and, on top of everything else, was stricken with writer's block. On the morning of September 18, 1970, Hendrix attempted to battle his insomnia by taking 9 sleeping pills, which left him so incapacitated that he choked on his own vomit and died.
Jimi Hendrix experience is over. The acid rock musician died today in a London hospital, apparently from an overdose of drugs.
16 days later, music would lose another legendary performer. Janis Joplin. Inspired by beautifully bluesy ladies like Billie Holiday, Bessie Smith, and Big Mama Thornton, Janis Joplin quickly developed a reputation for being able to furiously belt out numbers as well as any man. She could also hold her own against men when it came to partying, which became a problem. Although she blew audiences' minds at the Monterey Pop Festival, at Woodstock, and on the legendary Festival Express train tour through Canada, Joplin's alcohol and heroin habits were profound. Although efforts were made to sway her into rehab, she finally succumbed to her addictions on October 4th, 1970, dying of a heroin overdose in her hotel. Brian Jones. Everyone knows Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, but when they began, the Rolling Stones were initially steered by multi-instrumentalist Brian Jones. As the Stones began moving in a more pop-centric direction, Jones grew more frustrated, drowning his sorrows in alcohol and drugs, which led to dramatic mood swings that eventually resulted in his dismissal from the Stones.
He was two things. He was not very nice, and he upset people very easily. He wasn't very pleasant.
Although Jones was reportedly in good spirits in his last days, his bad habits did not diminish, and on July 3, 1969, he was found at the bottom of his swimming pool, with the coroner ruling it as a case of death by misadventure. Jim Morrison. Doors frontman Jim Morrison may be even more popular now than he was at the time of his death, both because of his music and because his excessive lifestyle has been richly detailed in a number of books and films. On July 3, 1971, Morrison was found dead in his bathtub in his Paris apartment, with the cause of death listed as heart failure. The fact that no autopsy was performed has led to theories about how he really died, whether he overdosed accidentally, if he was murdered, or if he even died at all. Regardless, his legacy still looms so large, it's like he never left. Jean-Michel Basquiat. If you're a fan of art, you can't help but be aware of Jean-Michel Basquiat, whose work impressed Andy Warhol so much that there was a period of creative collaboration between the two artists. Did we mention that he dated Madonna for a while too? Plus, he was in the video for Blondie's Rapture, which was an impressive claim as well. Unfortunately, Basquiat was also addicted to heroin, and when Warhol died in February 1987, Basquiat retreated into both depression and drugs. While he tried to turn things around on a trip to Hawaii, he ultimately overdosed on August 12, 1988. Anton Yelchin. He may be best known as Pavel Chekhov in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek series, but Anton Yelchin's acting credits have spanned over 15 years. On June 19, 2016, Yelchin got out of his Jeep Cherokee while in the driveway of his house in Studio City, California. The car rolled back, pitting him against a brick pillar and a security fence. By the time friends found Yelchin, he was dead. When Star Trek Beyond hit theaters a few weeks later, it was dedicated to Yelchin's memory. And the list goes on. While these were some of the most famous members of the 27 Club, they're far from the only ones. There's legendary bluesman Robert Johnson, Grateful Dead founding member Rob Pigpen McKernan, Pete Ham of Badfinger, Chris Bell of Big Star, soul singer Linda Jones, Dee Boone of the Minutemen, Pete DeFreitas of Echo and the Bunnymen, and Mia Zapata of the Gits, just to name a few. The saddest realization of all is that membership in this club will only continue to grow. All we can hope is that it won't grow too fast.
So many entertainers have passed away just 3 years shy of 30 that there's even a name for it, the 27 Club. While studies have shown that there's no increased statistical likelihood for celebrities to depart at a particular age, the morbid idea of the 27 Club persists. With high-profile examples like Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix, Amy Winehouse, and Anton Yelchin, it's not hard to understand why. Here are some other notable entertainers who left us at the age of 27. Fredo Santana. Derek Fredo Santana Coleman was a rising star in Chicago hip-hop, thanks to his successful 2013 debut album Trappin' Ain't Dead, several acclaimed mixtapes, and his hit single Pass Me My Double Cup. Unfortunately, his success and life were short-lived, as he passed away on January 19, 2018. Santana performed a kind of hip-hop called drill, a gritty reboot of trap music. But away from the studio and stage, he was battling an all-too-familiar demon, drugs. Specifically, he was addicted to lean, also known as purple drank, also known as cough syrup chugged at dangerously high levels, which led to major health issues. In October 2017, he checked himself into the hospital for kidney and liver failure. 3 months later, he had passed on. Ron Pigpen McKernan.
One of the founding members of the Grateful Dead, the guy everyone called Pigpen sang and played organ and harmonica for the iconic group.
He also worked hard to establish the band as a pioneer in jug and blues-based rock, even before they were officially known as the Dead. Unfortunately for him, the other members didn't share that vision for very long. The group got heavily into LSD and began recording more psychedelic music. This left Pigpen, a hard-drinking blues man who didn't care for trippy drugs, out in the cold.
By 1970, McKernan's drinking had begun to hurt him so much he had to quit touring.
He couldn't stay away for long, though, as he returned the next year. But by June 1972, he was completely done with both touring and the band. On March 8, 1973, he suffered a fatal internal hemorrhage. Though he didn't last long with the Grateful Dead, the band would have never taken off without him. Linda Jones. Had Linda Jones lived longer, she might have become one of the most famous soul singers of all time. In 1967, she hit the big time with the song Hypnotized. She was on her way to becoming a star along the lines of Cissy Houston and Dionne Warwick, only fiercer. Jones, a diabetic, was at her mom's house on March 14, 1972, following an afternoon appearance at the Apollo Theater. She asked her mom to wake her up from a nap in time for her evening show, but instead, she found her daughter the victim of a diabetic coma. It wasn't the most soulful way to go, but a sadly realistic one. Mia Zapata. Seattle grunge rock band The Gits were really coming into their own during the age of Nirvana, but then catastrophe struck. On July 7, 1993, lead singer Mia Zapata was attacked by a man named Jesus Mesquia, who beat her, violated her, and then strangled her. He evaded capture for over a decade until DNA on her body linked him to the crime. Creepily enough, a song that Zapata wrote for the Gits' second album, released after her passing, all but foretold what would happen. Titled Sign of the Crab, it included lines about cutting up a human body and leaving parts of it across a town, and a killer escaping justice. Powerful songwriting, but not at all the kind of thing anyone wanted to come true.
Joseph Merrick, the Elephant Man.
Joseph Merrick wasn't exactly an entertainer by choice. As creatively depicted in the film The Elephant Man, he suffered from extreme physical deformities and was unable to find steady work until he realized that his curse was the only way he could make a legitimate income.
And yes, his name was Joseph, even though in the movie they changed his first name to John for some reason.
He joined the freak show circuit as the Elephant Man, charging people to gawk at his enlarged head, trunk-like forehead growth, and overgrown right arm. But eventually, England outlawed his act, and his manager stole his money. At that point, Merrick had little choice but to remain in a hospital for the rest of his days. On April 11, 1890, Merrick passed away in his sleep. Due to the extreme weight of his head, he was unable to sleep lying down, so he did so while sitting up. That night, however, he attempted to sleep like other people, crushing his own windpipe as a result. Robert Johnson. If you're into the blues, classic rock, or just music in general, you owe a debt to Robert Johnson. The man defined Chicago and Delta blues despite only recording a handful of tunes. But when those tunes include Sweet Home Chicago, Crossroads, and Love in Vain, you've already written more than enough to ensure your artistic immortality. Johnson's passing at the age of 27, like Johnson himself, is shrouded in mystery and rumor. We know he passed away on August 16, 1938, but we don't know how. Some say he succumbed to syphilis.
Some say he had a tissue disorder called Marfan syndrome.
Others insist he was poisoned by a lover's jealous boyfriend, and still others say his own girlfriend poisoned him. Pete Ham. Badfinger's Pete Ham is a tragic example of how the music industry can destroy lives. The band itself was poised to be the next Beatles, even getting signed to the lads from Liverpool's label, Apple Records. Ham was the smiling face of Badfinger, a fine guitarist with limitless potential. But then, the very business that was poised to make him huge completely betrayed him.
Badfinger found financial representation in New York businessman Stan Polly, who netted them a six-figure contract with Warner Records in 1974.
But he would only give them $1,000 per month allowance, claiming the rest was being saved and invested. In reality, Polly was stealing from them. This destroyed the band, especially Ham. Financially and emotionally broken, with a child on the way, he was desperate. On the morning of April 24, 1975, after drinking 10 scotches the night before, he hanged himself in his garage. John Young. South Korean music superstar Kim Jong-young, simply known as John Young to his fans, was a singer for the pop band SHINee before branching off into a solo career. His 2016 debut album, She Is, had topped the charts, and he had another album in the works. That all changed on December 18, 2017, when he was found unconscious in his Seoul apartment. By all accounts, Chang Young had taken his own life, the victim of carbon monoxide poisoning from heated charcoal. He had often publicly discussed his depression and the effect fame had on him, as he detailed in the note he left behind. "The life of fame was not for me. Why did I choose this life? It's a miracle that I lasted this long."